Chapter 11. Caden. I was disappointed that Lane's brother-in-law couldn't attend the retreat. I knew I needed him to make it through this week, as problematic as he would be, but he would have been better than going to the cabin alone, even if he spelled trouble. Now, without anyone I knew or could trust, who could pull off being mature, and a fake boyfriend who didn't live in this town, which left me no other choice than to fall back on my old standby. I'd been determined that I wouldn't be sitting around and gazing at Grayle, as if I was a lovesick schoolboy like before. This time I was determined not to be caught without a date, even if I had to pay them. However, that wouldn't be too cool, and it was out of the question, because I'd probably find myself in the same predicament, like a wallflower standing in the corner, waiting for someone to ask me to dance, and I'd be out of the money I needed to open my business. I was sure someone like that didn't come cheap. I had to find someone who met all the requirements of the date I required. Someone as desperate as I was on a Friday night, all dressed up and no place to go. I'd been determined not to look so needy when I met Grayle and his soon-to-be ex, and that was why I thought I had the perfect man. He was tall, slim, and cute as hell, and he was 30-something or 40, with just a hint of gray on the sides, which had him looking sexy. Just the type of man to make Grayle jealous. While driving to the cabin, I glanced over at my date. He looked like a dream come true, quiet but attentive. He offered me a smile and small talk. He had a sexy smile, and his language was polished, therefore I hoped Grayle would see him as a threat. I was betting too much on this one date to make an impression on everyone, where it would affect Grayle, and he would see that I could be scooped up if he didn't pay attention to me. I wasn't asking for too much, just a chance to be with Grayle, alone. I'd need enough time where we could kiss. Once you kissed someone, you would know then if there was something between you. I'd heard from Lane that the first kiss would tell it all. Lane had said, not all men kiss alike, and their kisses aren't created equal. You want a man that has practiced kissing, who when he places his tongue in your mouth, it creates a feeling of seduction and desire, shoots down to your balls, and you could swear he's just fucked you with his cock instead of his mouth, so you'd pull your pants down and tell him to go at it just from that one kiss. I have yet to find someone like that, but if it were possible that I'd drop my boxer briefs for anyone from a kiss, it would be for Grayle Meadows. My date appeared to be a good kisser, but you couldn't tell. He had a small mouth, and I didn't really think ours were compatible, but he had the perfect face and square jaw, olive skin, and green eyes. Where had he been hiding? I smiled, and he turned to glance my way when he saw me eyeing him, and shot me a sexy grin. I wanted my balls to tingle and my cock to twitch, but nothing happened. As great-looking as he was, I didn't know if I could stand being with him in a cabin in the woods for 2 whole days, especially with Grayle in the next room. When I considered it all, I realized that I didn't know this guy. He could be a serial killer, I thought. He was just too perfect looking. Those were the ones who would lull you with their good looks, and were way too easy and pleasant. With his looks, he should have asked me more questions. I knew I was desperate, and I knew why. I explained that I wanted a fake boyfriend for a few days, and he readily said, okay. No questions. Not even why would I want that. When I tried to clear my mind of this guy, because I'd been watching too much forensic science episodes, he turned to me with this wide grin I'd seen somewhere. I guessed I'd been a little premature in thinking that his mouth was too small. Now I knew where I'd seen a grin like his. It was the Joker in the Batman movies. Not quite as hideous because he had these cute small pink lips, but his mouth was a little too wide. He looked as if he'd been sucking cock for all of his 30-some years. Why was I seeing this now? Because I'd never seen him smile that broadly, and I couldn't imagine that his small mouth could distort into this hideous grin. When he showed up the same day of us leaving from his pictures, he was dressed in a suit, 6 feet, a lawyer type, and just the right age, Grayle's age, and he wore glasses. I had been beginning to like a man with glasses, but with a closer look at him, not so much. Choosing this fake boyfriend with the age he was, with his good looks, minus the smile, my thoughts were maybe Grayle would be jealous and could see that I was perfect for him, and he was just my type if he'd give me a chance and get rid of that boyfriend of his. However, this time if Austin showed up, I was ready. I'd have someone, and I wouldn't look like I was some kind of basket case, where everyone, including Grayle, had to feel sorry for me. When I took my eyes off the road, because my thoughts were on Austin and Grayle, the guy finally decided to talk, and he mumbled something, but I was too caught up in my thoughts to hear him or care, until he said, "You turned the wrong way. You turned the wrong fucking way. What were you thinking? And who doesn't have a GPS device in their car these days?" Now I knew by the sound of his voice that I didn't want to date him for more than a second. I'd probably have to bow out the next day and take him home and say so long to him, and "I don't want to ever see you again, even if you are handsome." For me, a man with a good-looking face wasn't everything, but if you got a package like Grayle, monogamous, easygoing, handsome, and a sense of humor, now that was something you couldn't find every day, and Austin must have known that. And that was why he'd been aggressive with me, because at Austin's age and experience with men, he knew Grayle was a keeper, and he'd fight tooth and nail to keep him. And now, I could see something I didn't like with this man sitting in the seat next to me. He'd freaked out, just because I'd turned the wrong way. "My car is old." He rolled his eyes and looked forward. I didn't say anything to him. I stopped the car and turned my Jeep around, and when I glanced over at him, there was this frightened look on his face. "What?" I questioned. "You almost ran this car into a ditch. What would happen if you had? There's no reception for my phone, and we could be here all night or a week until someone found us," he barked. "I don't think it would have taken that long," I said cheerfully. "I knew Lane would look for me if I hadn't called him, or made it to the cabin by dark. We're out in the wilderness, for God's sake. You haven't seen a car for miles, and where are the nearest houses anyway? I think you're a little reckless for my taste." "And you're a little too uptight for my taste," I wanted to say. However, I pretended that I hadn't heard him and headed in the right direction. That's the point of a retreat. It's not close to civilization. That's what I wanted to say, but I refrained from pissing him off. One of us getting angry would have been enough to ruin everything I wanted to accomplish. How could I pass this cute guy off as perfect, even though we both knew there were no perfect men, but for the sake of my interest I needed him to be perfect, and I hoped he knew how to keep his instincts, grumbling and outbursts in check. After I'd made my way back to the sign that said Meadows Hunting Lodge, I turned in the direction Grayle had texted, and to make sure I had the map Lane had given me for Google Earth. There was even a picture of the lodge. It was beautiful, and it looked like it could accommodate 10 or more guests. I was placing the picture in the compartment when my date said, "You didn't tell me that we would be climbing a hill. I get nervous if the hill is too high." I glanced over at him. "Keep your eyes on the road," he yelled, and I thought he would grab my steering wheel. Now that would have sent me over the edge, and I would have crashed the car. "Zach. Do you mind if I call you Zach?" I wasn't asking his permission. I wanted to call him fuckhead, dickwad, but I was trying to keep my cool and my promise to myself. "Do you always scream and try to grab someone's steering wheel when they're driving?" "Only if they drive as recklessly as you," he admitted. "The screaming and yelling is enough to unnerve anyone. Could you refrain from doing that in front of my friends?" Just about this time, I realized that I should have vetted him. I should have done some kind of search before I'd picked Zach. He even said that he had a new car. I thought maybe we could take his, and I'd reimburse him for gas and other expenses. He drove up with an old Lincoln that his mom bought new 20 years ago, and parked that antique in front of my parents' home. He said that it was a classic and worth a lot of money. To whom? His mom. To tell you the truth, I had second thoughts about this date from the beginning, he had the nerve to say. "Why didn't you say something? I could have gotten someone else to come with me," I said, as calm as the situation would allow me. Zach crossed his arms over his chest. "I thought I would like you, and we could get a different arrangement going forward, but I see you're not my cup of tea. Can you just pretend for a few days?" Act like an attentive boyfriend for a few hours, then we can go our own merry way and never have to lay eyes on each other again, I said with a furrowed brow, a tight palm on the steering wheel, and gritted teeth. I guess I can, but it will be hard. He glared at me, sucked his teeth, and turned away from me. Oh fuck, this will be hard. I hoped Grayle wouldn't see through this facade. If things didn't work out, I could always say that we couldn't get along and take him back early, but hell, I didn't want to leave Grayle. This is such a perfect spot to get to know someone, I thought as I drove up the road leading to the front of the cabin. You have some rich friends, Zach commented. They're just working people. What is it that you do? I thought that since he was 39, he was established in his career. I never thought to ask. Not that it would have made me like or dislike him, but with the attitude he had, it certainly would have weighed on my decision to like him or not, and at this point I was hoping he would say something like, I have my own business, or, I'm an artist. I didn't give a fuck what, as long as it wasn't, I'm homeless. Even that I could deal with. I could say he was kidding. Just a jokester. I'm in between jobs. I seem to have a problem getting along with people I work with. I wondered why. So you stay with your parents? More of a question instead of a statement. No. I live in my mother's basement. What is the fucking difference? I thought. I can't afford the rent for my own place until I make some changes. Like stop being obnoxious and full of bullshit. Stop being antagonistic. Stop being an ass came to mind. If I can ask you one thing. Shoot, he said, pointing a finger my way. I'd never held a gun in my life, because I was a pacifist. However, at that moment when he said shoot, I was willing to borrow one of my father's hunting rifles. I took my eyes off the road for a second to aim a 1-second stare, because I was wondering if I could get away with it. No. Not worth the effort. Please don't tell anyone what you told me about living with your parents, I begged. Do you want me to lie? He questioned. If these are the kind of friends you have, just turn around and take me home. The thought of burying him in the forest passed through my mind a second time. Well, I couldn't help some thoughts, as long as I didn't carry it out. No, I don't want you to lie, by all means, don't. Fuck yes I do. You just don't have to tell them anything, because they won't ask you. They're too gentlemanly to ask you that, because they wouldn't want to offend you. He sat back and turned up the music and smiled. I feel better already. I bet you do, I thought, taking my eyes off the road for a second.